Hi, I'm Ken,
And I'm Yasmin. And
and
this
this
is
is
Conversations
Conversations
with
with
Ken
Ken
and
and Yas.
Yasmin.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Conversations with Ken and Yasmin. And today we have an amazing guest, Erin Tillman. Erin Tillman, the dating advice girl, is an inclusive sex educator, dating and consent empowerment coach, author, speaker, and TV, radio, podcast host based in Los Angeles, California. In 2018, Erin was awarded the Gender Equality Award presented by the California National Organization for Women. She is dedicated to empowering singles in all lifestyles to have happy and enjoyable dating lives that best suit their dating and relationship wants, needs, and objectives. For over 10 years, she has helped singles successfully navigate through the early stages of dating through empowerment and consent workshops at conferences and on college campuses. Through her book, The Consent Guidebook, over 100 dating related articles for various lifestyle and dating sites, hosting events for singles, working as a matchmaker, radio and TV interviews, and through her podcast, the Dating Advice Girl podcast. She has been featured on Lifetime Network, BuzzFeed, ABC7 Los Angeles, and mentioned in The Guardian, Elle Magazine, Men's Health Magazine, The Washington Post, The Chicago Tribune, just to name a few media outlets. Erin's book, The Consent Guidebook, is an easy to follow guide that offers practical advice from over 30 experts for establishing boundaries and respecting the boundaries of others. Erin, thank you for doing this show. It's been a long time since I've seen you in person. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm good. Thanks for having me, Ken and Yasmin. Yay!
Thank you for
I'm
being here.
doing as well as anyone can do, considering that we're in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
But no. Actually, I feel like the year is ending on an interesting note of kind of not that things are over. Clearly, COVID's raging out there, and there's a lot of things happening. But I think that I think that there's been a lot of lessons learned this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'll speak for myself, personally and professionally. I feel like there's been a lot revealed about who are in our circles. Our inner circles and outer circles. And are those people who are in our inner circles who we want in our inner circles? So I'm in a really a good place of clarity, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like we're going to end this year strong as long as we wear our masks. Dang it.
Mm-hmm.
But it is good to see you too, and it's definitely been a while, and
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, so much is happening, just so much is happening. Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Erin, this is my first time meeting you, and thank you again for doing this. And I'm so excited to meet you and speak with you. Can you talk about your journey to this work? How did you find this work, or were you called to the work, and your journey in dating and relationships?
Yes. Well, nice to meet you too. Yay! I like the show. I've watched the other
Oh,
episodes.
thank
So
you.
great. So it's an interesting story. So I'm older than I look, for one, and that's relevant because I started off in the dating relationship industry, let's say, before dating apps. Get ready. Before Instagram. I think it was before YouTube started, or maybe around that same time, which was like 2007, 2008. So yeah, around that time, that's where I began. So blogs weren't a thing. So I mean, literally, not to toot my own horn, but I was one of the early people giving opinions in a digital in a how do I say this, like on the cusp of social media, let's say. I was basically in a TV hosting class in Los Angeles, and I had been doing some red carpet interviewing of celebrities and that kind of thing. And our teacher was like, so it's really important to have a niche and a brand. What's something that you have a lot of opinions about? And
Mhm.
so I have a lot of opinions about a lot of things, but one of the things that always irked me, even back to when I was younger, was why are there double standards at the time between men and women? Now I would say between cis men and cis women. in the heterosexual landscape. But there's a lot more, but genders, lifestyles, all the things. So in orientation. So all that to say, why are there all these double standards between men and women? I don't like it. Here's the deal. I see dudes sleeping around and all these things. And then if a girl does, then it's like, oh my God, she's all these bad words and negative things we'd say about her. So I started writing about that, just my own opinion about things, whatever, again, before blogs. So at the time, I think I had like mentioned to a few people, I was just writing down my thoughts. And then somebody I mentioned this to was like, I know this independent radio station in Hollywood, and they're always looking for people who have opinions, and maybe like they're looking for talk show format type people. Have you ever thought about having your own show? I'm like, well, I hadn't before, but now maybe I am. That's how it started. I was literally in a recording booth, just talking about all the things. I remember having a conversation with someone at the radio station, saying, you guys, there's this new thing called podcasting, and it's really convenient. Like you can literally like listen to it on your phone, and like it's a whole thing. And I remember them saying, they're like, this is not a serious thing. Like, no. I'm like, well, all right, well, I'm gonna go and bring my show and like record it and put it on that platform. Like, yeah, do whatever you want. And I'm like, okay, well, thank you very much. And so now I'm sure there's a whole bunch of legal documents you'd have to sign to even get into that, from a radio show shifting to that now. But so I'm glad I saw the potential in that, because that was the thing that really did kind of build me or launch me into something bigger. So I shifted my radio show to podcast platform format. But then during that, I was also starting to get speaking engagements at colleges. Around the time dating apps started to be a thing and started to be less stigmatized, because I think we all remember a time when it was like, somebody met somebody on a dating app or on a dating site. No, the embarrassment, the horror. And now it's like, okay, everyone knows what they are at the least. Most people have been on them or at least tried. But like, it's less of a big deal. I mean, I know I met my partner on Tinder. I know I have clients that have met their partners on various sites. So it's less of a big deal. So but at the time though, so colleges were like, oh, this is interesting. College students are starting to use these things. They brought me in to talk about dating safety. Also consulted with dating apps, just around how to be more consensual. I'm skipping over a ton of stuff. People started reaching out to me, enter social media apps. And, it's a great way to find experts and advice. There's a lot of bad, ridiculous, non-helpful stuff too. But I mean, this is a very interesting time where people are looking for easily accessible education and information. And I can't even tell you, I've had so many conversations recently with, I'm associated with a couple of nonprofits and a couple other writing groups and organizations. And just a side note, I'm all over the place here. Stay with me. There's a point to this. But I remember it was 2 weeks ago, and I was on a panel with Beverly White, who's one of the news anchors here in LA, NBC4. And somebody was saying something about, legitimacy of journalism, which absolutely, and all these things. And then someone was like, yeah, because, things like Twitter and Instagram, like, aren't relevant or aren't good sources of information. And I said, listen, I said, as someone who was an early adopter to all of these things, I've gotten most of my work through social media. Right. And so, but also, it's not going to work for everybody. It depends on what your thing is. So for me, being a dating coach, and for me remembering a time when I began in this business in the dating industry, and people are like, what do you do? Wait, I'm sorry, what is this you're doing? Yeah. Like literally, the levels of frustration, again, I've been at this for 12, 13 years. And in the beginning, it was literally like, I don't understand what she does. And now I finally caught up with the times, and people are like, oh, I get it. I get it now. But part of that comprehension is because I'm so active on social media. And there's ways to get your message out there in a fun way. And so I've very much been trying to use these platforms to do that, to educate people around consent, especially, but also dating, various lifestyles, orientations, just things that they might not have access to. Stay with me here. One more piggyback on that. I think that I'm very much, I have a soft spot in my heart specifically for the education part of this. I grew up in a very small town in Ohio. One would say that, well, it's definitely more conservative leaning now. It probably was in the past, but when you're a kid, you don't necessarily see as much of that. But, you know, I was just there earlier this year, and what I see is that there are a lot of people who are like, I don't want whatever that is over there, whatever you are, I don't want any part of that, which is not okay, and that's hurtful, but that's what their choice is. But then there's a lot of other people who are like, you know, I've heard about these things. Like, I've heard about polyamory, or I've heard about, you know, certain apps or lifestyles or genders and all these things, but I don't know, and I'm afraid to ask questions because I'm afraid to be wrong. And maybe they've had an experience of, you know, asking a question, and then someone's like, well, you lose, you're wrong, so you're out, and sorry, you should have known, or whatever. And so I'm in a place where I really, my whole 12 years in this has been me trying to learn for myself, because I'm a total nerd. I got my nerdy glasses on, but no, I love learning things. I don't know everything. And you know, there's always something to learn if we're educators. And so because I'm someone who is always trying to learn and see what the kids are doing and see what the new terms are and the new, I'm actively always trying to learn. And so I'm very aware that if I'm still learning as a coach, there's definitely people out there who still are trying to learn as well. And so I just am in a place where I've been trying to learn as much as I can and try to educate people without shaming them, without making them feel bad about what they don't know. And so I guess that's my really, really long-winded.
No, I'm fascinated by your life and your work, Erin. I'm completely fascinated by this. And I have to ask you a question. Do you feel pressure to have, I don't want to say a perfect relationship, personal relationship with a partner, but just the idealized relationship with a partner as a dating coach, as an educator, a relationship expert? Do you feel that pressure that you have to have that idealized relationship to give advice and support?
Excellent question. I mean, I think that, so I'm known as the dating advice girl. So there was a whole joke for years around, yeah, I'm not the marriage advice girl. I'm not the relationship advice girl. I'm the dating advice girl.
That's
so
right.
I know all the dating stuff. Like, I can help. So typically that's what I do. You know, when I coach clients, it's basically me. They come to me because they're like, I'm newly single, I'm newly divorced. There's so many dating apps. I don't even know how this works. Like, where do I even begin? Where do I find somebody who is into this, and this? That's what I do. I'm really good at that. I'm good at helping people, empowering people in the process, the dating process, getting them out of their heads, helping them gain confidence when meeting people, even just talking to new people, because that can be really nerve-wracking for people. Some people, especially if someone's more of an introvert, you know, or shy, or to just start a conversation. So I'm the dating advice girl. So for a lot of time, I've avoided, I've not really had trouble. I will say this though. I think that I'm in a really amazing relationship right now, of almost 2 years. And I don't want to digress too much about that, but we can totally talk about him. He's an amazing person. And he's actually a big part of the story too. But prior to meeting him, I definitely was very, as you can imagine, very selective about who I would date. Because I know the tricks that a lot of guys use. And so I would spot it a mile away and I'm like, no, thank you. But also it takes a very strong person, a very confident person to date a dating coach. Like, yeah. I definitely dated people who I could tell, even though they're like, oh my God, like what you do is so cool and it's so fast. I could tell they were intimidated, and I could tell they couldn't really relax around me. And so that's not okay either. And not because they didn't want to relax. They were just on their guard, which I totally get. And again, I'm not for the faint of heart. having said that, like, I don't, like, in my relationship, I don't, my partner Jet would say that I'm not like coaching him. Like, hey, the rule book set. No. Like, are you kidding me? That would be so exhausting. So like, I'm very much, I don't let my professional life enter into my personal life. But also my partner is a very secure person and is a huge cheerleader for what I do as well. And so we don't have conflict around that. But yeah, to summarize and answer your question, it is not easy to date me if somebody is maybe nervous, or if someone's up to no good.
Right.
I'm not the choice for that.
I have to ask you, are your clients looking for marriage? I know it's the dating and it's the relationship coaching, but is there the ultimate goal a long-term or a full or a long-term partnership or marriage? Is that the goal you're finding?
So, I mean, it's interesting. That's a great question, actually. So no is the short answer.
Okay.
My brand from the beginning had, so going back, so when I started, it was the whole thing about why are there double standards and things. So the other thing that I would always get frustrated about is that I feel like there was always this idea, especially perpetrated by like Hollywood and TV and movies, of like finding the one, the person, a la Jerry Maguire, the person who's going to complete you. I've always been very non-traditional in my dating relationships. And I've experimented a lot in a lot of things. I shouldn't say experimented because bear with me here. So I say experiment because I think there's certain things that you might, or certain kinds of relationships you might get into, or certain lifestyles you might enter into because you're curious. And part of getting to know who you are and potentially finding potential partners is to figure out what you like and what fits for you and what you don't like and what doesn't work for you. And so for me, a lot of the frustration I felt early on was all about finding the one and getting to the one. And if you don't have the one, then you're less valid, or something's wrong with you if you haven't found a husband by 30, or if your relationship looks different, then what's the matter with you guys over there. And I always felt like that was weird, and I never thought it was okay. And I, again, in my own life, I was always like, I don't do things like that. And I actually don't know if I ever want to be married. And I don't know if I want to have kids. And but there's nothing wrong with me. Like, I'm very happy. I'm actually maybe happier than some of the people who are pursuing this idea of finding this perfect human to spend 70 years without conflict ever, and never I don't know. So no, I mean, I coach my clients. Basically, my job is to help them figure out what they want. And if that means finding a life partner, great. I can help with that, but only to the point where it's finding people who aligned with what they're looking for. I'm not like a mail order bride matchmaker, right? And that's what essentially I would be, I think. If I did have that idea of how that's the only way I can help someone is help them find the one. And so this goes back to the idea real quick of, I think that sometimes in the coaching realm, and not just dating or relationship coaching, but I think that sometimes there's this idea of I have the magic pill to fix you. And that's not what I am. My thing is, maybe I can help show you some new skills. Maybe I can point you in the direction of other people who are aligned with what you're looking for, or fit into the category you're in, or maybe I can help you figure out what category you're in. Disclaimer, I also hate labels. So when I say category, it's just like a general starting point, right? So if somebody comes to me, I'm kind of the gateway for people. So the gateway from like vanilla mainstream world to I might be kind of interested in something new, or I might want to learn something new. I'm that middle person. I'm your guide. So I've had clients in the past that are, like, gosh, I've been curious about BDSM, or I've been curious about something more non-traditional, let's say, but I've been afraid to ask. I don't know where to begin. I know I don't maybe want this to be like my full lifestyle. Like but I'm kind of curious, and where would I find those people? So I'm that person. Like, I'm the person that could help somebody find, that thing that isn't on most mainstream apps, or isn't a part of most mainstream matchmaking services. Like I'm that person, which is great. Because again, I grew up in a place where I didn't learn about a lot of that either. So I very much can relate to the experience of feeling like you don't really fit in with all the messaging you're getting from mainstream America, from parents, from friends, from where you live. And then it's like, well, where do I go? So you come to me.
Listening to you, it sounds like your work is helping the person discover oneself and preparing that person to be their very best in finding a partner or a date or a relationship. It's like the self-work, from what I'm understanding, is what you're doing to help people. It's working on yourself first. Is that correct?
Yes. No, thank you for saying that. I mean, that is, in a perfect world, we would all come in with like, oh my gosh, I'm going to like, whatever this endeavor is or whatever this thing I want, I'm going to make myself better first. Before I even pursue that thing or that person, I'm going to do everything I can to be awesome. And, like maybe check in with myself and, look at my past relationships and see maybe where I maybe did something that wasn't great and that I could improve upon. But sadly, a lot of us don't do that on our own. Or maybe there's, and to be fair, I mean, I think, the self-awareness part is hard. And we can only, I feel like we can only kind of do that to a point on our own to ourselves. Athletes have coaches, business people have coaches, like everyone has some sort of coach to help guide them or see something they don't see and help guide them in the right direction. So that's what I am. So yeah, there's a big empowerment piece to what I do. It's not just about, there's people over there that you'll like on that app or at that meetup group or what, it's like, okay, well, let's see, like, have you ever actually taken a look at who you are and what you want? And are we operating in a place where we're operating back to like 20-year-old you and you're 40 now? Like, how are you exactly the same person that you were back then? Also, are you even the person you think you are? Because maybe we're operating based on what our parents said we were, or based on where we grew up, or based on what our friends are doing, or based on what shows we're watching. I mean, there's just so many things that influence us. So yes. The empowerment part is a huge part, and figuring out who we actually are right now today is also a huge part, for sure.
I'm so glad you said that, because especially empowerment, and I'm so glad you brought up Hollywood and the idealized version of what a relationship looks like. And I think especially in the 90s, those looking for, and I want to mention, I'm not going to mention certain TV shows or certain movies, but I think we all know what we're talking about. They were all created for people to pursue this unrealistic, not for everybody lifestyle. And I think that time period and those films and programs, those TV shows, really damaged people it was women especially, if they did not fit into that mold.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the 90s. Oh boy. It's so funny. I was just talking to a friend of mine. One of my friends she does a Zoom room, like movie screening thing, like once a week. And so she was doing a whole thing of like movies of the 80s and 90s. And some of these movies, even though they're classics and even though I still love them, are so horrific to watch now. I mean, it's so like some of the ideas in some of these movies and some of the things like around, like, especially because my work is heavily consent focused. So like, I can't like, I'm like, some of these, I'm like, I didn't even notice that. I don't even remember that part of that movie before, but oh my God, that's so problematic. Having said that, I just wanted to take a moment to address that real fast and say, I think that we have to leave a space for, obviously we can't consume things that are gonna trigger us, like heavily trigger us. But I also feel like, we can appreciate that maybe something was made in a different period of time. And that, like I was watching Purple Rain not long ago, and that for those of you who haven't seen it, like there's a scene in the beginning where like someone literally throws a girl in a dumpster. And I'm like, okay. So like this movie is so amazing on so many levels, but that part of that movie is like, woof. But it was also made in the like 82 or
84. 80, it came out in 84.
There you go. And so you totally know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like one of those things where it's like I can still appreciate that movie for what it is, and Prince being a genius and all these things, but also I can look at that and be like, wow, like, woo, like look how far we've come in some ways. That's not like just like part of the movie just for fun, like, you know. But yeah, to your point, Yasmine, like, you know, I think that it's there's so many growing up in the 80s and 90s. Oh gosh, even like, you know, music videos from the 90s.
Yes.
It's like there's so many things that have influenced, like subconsciously influenced how we feel, what regardless or specifically because of our gender and regardless of our gender. There's some things ingrained just because media is so prevalent in who we are. And I mean, I don't know about either of you, but I grew up watching, like, I mean, MTV, like all of these things. And so it's like that influences us whether we are aware of it or not. And so I just want to say real quick too, like it's been very, I was on another podcast recently. We're talking about the accelerated nature of information right now. Mm-hmm. And you know, how social media, how the internet's amazing, but also it can be terrible. Same with social media, right? Good and bad. But I think that it can be very overwhelming if you're trying to keep up with all the things that are changing. And I think that kind of goes back to my point earlier. I think a lot of people, it's easy for people to just be like, well, those people, or like, I like what now people are changing this and that and genders and orientations. It's like, well, they aren't changing them. This is who they are. And there's more of a way to express these things and find others who are doing this. And we're seeing more of it. And also, things are accelerating at a rapid pace. You know, my partner is a trans masculine person. And we've had conversations that even he, because he's in his 40s, that even he is learning things about trans people and he's trans. Like, so the speed at which information is being updated is so fast because of media and because of internet. And so it can be overwhelming. But all but to say, I think it's really, even though we have a long way to go, I think it's a really amazing thing to see how many changes have happened so quickly. And also it can be overwhelming to see all the changes that are happening so quickly.
I have to ask you, Erin, have you ever worked with older people, post-millennials, and do you encourage them to change their way of thinking? Because we were discussing categories, how people who are post-millennials may have this idea of categories, whereas the millennials don't. Should they change their way of thinking, or do you work with what they are coming to the table with?
That's an excellent question. So I'm not here to change anybody. Like I'm kind of the guide to help someone really be honest about who they are and what they're looking for. Because I think a lot of times let's just say, especially Americans, we'll say humans is one level, and then Americans is another level. And especially Americans, there's this whole thing. I lived in Europe for a while, so that's why I know I've seen some differences, you know. And obviously Europe is a huge place. So I've lived in France and England, and and those are my comparisons when I say like Europe or UK, and then here. But there are a lot of, again, back to the categories of it all. Like, if you don't fit in this category, then I don't understand. Like, I don't understand you because you're not in this category. Like, how do I put you in a category? And then that's very scary for people. It can be. I help, to your question though, I have worked with older people. Older meaning, oh my God, my age and older. Oh, I'm in the older category now. I am. So all of it to say, okay, so let's go back to maybe 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I worked as a matchmaker at a matchmaking agency here in Los Angeles. the general age bracket of most of the clients was 40 to 70. So before that, I'd actually mostly worked with younger people, college age, 20s, around my age, 30s. So it was very interesting to work with those age groups. I was like, they're going to have it together. They're going to be so much more mature. It's going to be so easy. No, just as much drama, if not more. By drama, I mean, the levels of here's one of the things. I think that some could argue that the more life you live, the more you know what you don't want, which I think is true to some extent. And that was definitely heavily played out at this matchmaking agency. Mm-hmm. It was like, I've been married 3 times. I know what I want and don't want. I don't like lawyers because they're all evil. I don't want someone that lives more than 10 miles from my house. And it's like, oh, well, this is going to be really difficult. So those are the main, as I get older, I get it, right? I get it. It's like, I don't want to waste my time. Time is precious. And so I get it. Having said that, one of the things I do try to help change in my clients is just to maybe open their minds a little bit. Specifically, I'll frame it in the way of, if you haven't found what you're looking for yet, and you aren't finding success doing the things you're doing, please, if you're hiring me, let me try to offer something new, a new strategy or a new way of thinking that could get you what you want. I'm here to help you. I'm not here to make things more complicated. But you have to be open to it. I don't like this term because I feel like it's a little skeezy, but some coaches say you have to be teachable. And so, but it's true though. I can't help someone who isn't open necessarily to a new idea. It's just not, it's a waste of time, everyone's time. So, but yeah, if someone's, usually though, clients come to me when they are open because they see something that's not working and they're like, I need help. And so generally speaking, regardless of age, but especially if they're older and especially if they're newly divorced or widowed. I've had some clients who are widows or widowers, and they're like, they're just the best because it's a lot of them came from a loving relationship. So it wasn't like a divorce or something, something that had some, what's the word I'm looking for? They came from something loving. So their heart space is bigger in some ways. It was they were remembering their former relationship and had high hopes that maybe they could find something, not to replace that person, but it was just more of a loving journey for them rather than if someone just went through a 6-figure divorce settlement. Everybody, and no one's gonna, that's way harder. It's way harder. So that's the challenge with older clients, and somebody just really quickly, I was having a conversation with someone this week and they said that they met somebody who was in the early 70s or late 60s and had just transitioned gender. And there was this whole conversation. My friend was saying it was a really sad conversation because this person was like, I'm really happy that I was able to finally transition. This person had been married and kids and the whole thing. And they were like, yeah, but it's over for me. I'm not going to find anybody because I'm older and who's going to want me now that I transitioned and all these things. This person was in a small town. And so, my friend was trying to tell them, just trying to say, it's not over. Just know that there are people who are going to find you attractive. It's a very hard thing. And, speaking with I don't want to get too deep into this either, but, just having so many conversations with my partner, it's a very identity, right? It's the idea of identity. And it's hard enough for cisgendered people, all of us who, I don't want to make assumptions, but I assume we feel like the gender that that we express out in the world. And so it's hard enough for us, but then you add on to it if you don't feel like the gender that you were assigned and have lived maybe most of your life, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm going to make the decision now to transition. And so there's so much tied into identity and confidence or lack of confidence and perception. And again, back to all the messages we get in society of who's lovable and who isn't, you know, who's accepted and who isn't, who's attractive and who isn't. And so I just think it's an interesting thing now. Oh my gosh, and this could be its own podcast episode, to be honest. There's so much here, but it's just an interesting. So my job, I'll wrap it up with this. You know, my job is to possibly point somebody in the direction of whatever the thing is that they're maybe starting to learn about themselves. Point them in the direction of someone who's maybe better equipped. Like I have a lot of coaches that I have some, you know, transgender coaches that I'm like, oh my gosh, like I totally don't think I'm the best person to help this client, but this colleague of mine is great. So whether I'm the coach for somebody or I point them in the direction of somebody else, awesome. My goal, whether it's, you know, a little Pollyanna or like we are the world, is just to help people find happiness, whatever that looks like for them. And that's maybe why I'm less tied to whatever someone's consensual choice is. It's like, you can be poly, you can be monogamous, you can be looking for the one too. And I will help you find people who might be great and end up being the one, but I'm not gonna be like, here's your person. Like, I that's not my job. But if I can help somebody on that journey and maybe just help give them resources, then I feel like I'm helping in some way.
So Erin, what I want to do is talk to you about the book, the Consent Guidebook. Now, we met in 2017, I believe. From the pictures, I think it was 2017. But
social media says, right.
Yeah, so I was like looking back, and so I believe it was 2017. But in your journey into creating the book, which I read again last night, which I forgot about. It's interesting reading it now, where when it came out, like a lot of the people that are in the book, I've been on panels with and stuff. So it was interesting to sit back and go like, oh yeah, there's Allison. Oh yeah, there's Kathy. And there's, you know, so it was like going back through and like going like, oh wow, and seeing these people. But the journey for you to creating the book, if you could talk a little bit about that process, because I think it's an amazing book. And I've got a couple of questions, specific details as we go through it. But I wanted to just talk to you mainly because Yasmine's a writer, I'm a writer, and about the process of you taking your work and putting it into this really tight and very cohesive book that really helps a lot of people, because it allows you to get into the book and actually discover work for yourself once you read through it.
Oh, thanks, Ken. Karen, don't make me cry. You know, it's interesting because I appreciate everything you just said. I will tell you about the process. I was really, really nervous writing this book. Like, I actually wrote another book probably about 8-9 years ago, but I took it out of print because, again, the speed of information is changing so quickly. It was called the Dating Guidebook, and at some point I'll probably do an updated edition. But I wrote the Dating Guidebook before a lot of the dating apps were around, and so it's just totally irrelevant now. So I'll probably do an updated version of that. But so the Consent Guidebook was my second book I'd written, and so I wrote it during 2017, I think, height of the Me Too movement. All the things are happening. You know, I'd been a dating coach at that point for about 10 years. 10 years, is that right? Whatever, 19 years. And at that point, even though I talked about consent a little, the Me Too movement was definitely like the moment where I was like, how am I not integrating this into what I do? Tarana Burke is the originator of the Me Too movement, and she's been at it for years and years before it became a trend in 2017. I just always want to give a shout out to her. She's doing the work. She was in New York, like pounding the pavement, helping like teens and like you know, POC people in New York, like in abusive situations. Like, I mean, so anyway, so then it became a viral thing in 2017. It's a huge topic, and I was so nervous because I'm like, okay, by the way, I just want to say I might get a little emotional during this because I'm a big softie all of a sudden. And so whatever. And I very much believe in what I do. So just bear with me. So, I was like, well, I have to integrate this into what I do, but how dare I be the one to write this book? Like, there's people who are way more qualified than I am to write about consent. I just mentioned Tarana Burke, who'd been doing this work for way many years before it was trending on Twitter, right? But I wasn't seeing tons of books. There were a couple books out there and a couple legends in like the sex ed world written some things, but I'm like this is the time. Like, people are actually paying attention right now, and I know I have a lot to say. So I almost let that stop me from writing the book, though, because it was just this overwhelming feeling of how can it just, how dare I? So that's where I decided to have colleagues of mine add advice to the book. So as you mentioned, I have 30 plus experts in different fields, health teachers, sex ed professionals, different coaches and people in the book giving advice, because it can't just be my voice. Yes, I have a voice and I have some experiences around, even personal experiences around sexual misconduct and things, but I have one experience. I do have some privilege having grown up the way I did in the suburbs, two parents who graduated from college. I went to college. I've lived in Europe. I look a certain way. I've been working in TV and film. I know what all of my identities are, and there's a whole bunch of other people with other identities that have a lot of stories that need to be told and other perspectives about it. So that's why I was like, it's really important for me to have not just me in the book. And also that took some pressure off, because I was like, okay, great. Like, it's not just me solving the world solving the problems. So yeah, I mean, it was really important that I have different ethnicities, different genders, different specializations in the book, people giving advice. So I wrote the book. I mean, even now I like talking about it, I'm like anxious, because there was so much anxiety writing. I'm like, I know people are gonna have opinions about it. I know people are gonna have negative opinions about it. I know, but it's so that's why I branded my book as, an easy to follow, easy digestible guide. It's not just, boundaries and consent in dating and sex. It's also boundaries with friends and family. It's also getting to know your own boundaries. It's also how to talk to somebody who may be in your life who's crossed boundaries. Like maybe when we could go to bars, remember that way back? Maybe you're at the bar with a friend and your friend being a little aggressive with somebody, like how to talk to your friend in a loving way, call them in and be like, hey bro, like, the way you talk to that girl with a little, so tips like that, tips for survivors. So it's definitely, my book is an initial conversation for consent and boundaries. And I am very proud of it. There's definitely some things I would change now if I could go back, but whatever. It was a moment in time, and I knew I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So no matter what I do, I'm gonna be like you could have done that better, or that, So I'm happy about what it is. I'm happy that for what it is, I did it when I did it, and I'm happy to do an updated version of it at some point, or an addition to it later. But that's how it started. It was just me watching all the things happening out there in the Me Too movement in 2017 specifically, and seeing that there weren't more conversations around the dating aspect of it. Me Too movement going viral of it all was about canceling people because there were egregious things happening that were like hurting people, right? So that's the top level, I guess. Yes. And then there's these other things below the top level that are, maybe better communication could help solve this, or could help, going forward, or, let's talk about our own boundaries. And, have we had conversation, that's self-awareness. Have we looked into ourselves and really thought about what our boundaries are in different scenarios? Have our boundaries changed? Are our boundaries different with different people? Or is it just a blanket, here are my boundaries forever, always? Like, shouldn't be. I mean, hopefully hopefully we can get to a place where we're able to look at our boundaries and like in a scenario, each scenario, specific scenario basis, and see how do I feel now with this person right now. How do I feel about this with this person right now? Those kind of things. But again, it's all education, and I don't want to make assumptions that everyone knows this, and I don't want to make even me being a coach. I mean, me and my partner have conversations around boundaries, and it's not just, oh, we talked about that like 6 months ago, it's done. It's like, no, dude, like, has it changed? Like, what's like, let's talk about it, and so it's really important that we normalize talking about this stuff. It's not easy to talk about, and I should make that very clear. I think that sometimes as educators, again, we can make it seem like we got it all figured out. No, it's still hard for us. Like, we're human beings too. Like, I hate hearing the word no. I hate it. Like, but I'm not gonna like go against somebody's no because I want something. No, it's like, woo, I heard that no, but at least I know where they stand, and great. I'm not, that's great. Now I know how to proceed or not proceed now. Great. But it's not easy to hear it. Okay. So I think we need to be real about what it is, and not just be like, you should know boundaries and you should do consent and you should always be happy about all of it. Like, that's not realistic.
Because you did entitle it a guidebook, not, the Bible. And it's one of those things that step by step, as you go through it, there were points in times when I started thinking about just my own personal experiences, especially when it comes to when you're in like longer term relationships, and the idea of entitlement, where just because something was agreed to like once before doesn't mean that that's going to continuously grow. Things change, people change. And you start thinking about the work that you need to do as an individual in order to make your current relationships and future relationships better. Because I had a hard copy of it that I got shortly after it came out, and I couldn't find it. So I got it on Kindle and read it this week. The clarity of the nomenclature, the experiences that you have, especially with the experts that you have, like when you give the example of, I forgot the name of the expert that was talking about children being forced to kiss relatives or some form of punishment, what that actually does as far as establishing this kind of understanding of consent and body autonomy, which I thought was amazing to sit back there and look at that as a specific example that I think a lot of the younger generation gets.
Yes. I just want to say really quickly, 2 quick things to piggyback on that. One is, I remember I was speaking at East LA College, probably 2018. And I remember this super broed out frat boy, and he was at a part of a frat and stuff. And like super, just what you would like, super cute, like chisel, I was like, okay. And he said to me, it was like, I was doing a workshop there. It was me and on a panel around consent. And he said something like, I said, it was like question and answer time. He was like, I just want to know if you had any tips for making sure that my sister is safe, or something I could do to make sure my girlfriend feels safe. I was like, and this is, again, the kids. I'm telling you, these kids are going to save the world. I was like literally in tears. And like, I tell people all the time, I'm like, I made a judgment about that guy because he's like, I'm in a frat. And he said something about like seeing his frat bros do something, and he'd be like, hey bro, like we're saying in my book. I mean, I was like, I literally have something about that in my book, young sir. But like, I mean, it was like, I was so moved. I was like, see, they are listening, and thank goodness they're paying attention, because I mean, I had like minimal consent in my sex ed growing up. And so this generation at least is more informed than a lot of us were. And so, they make a choice if they're going to be consensual in their lives or not. But at least they have more information at a younger age than we did. Second thing I wanted to say is that my mom reminds me, I love this story. It's so funny. I grew up in a family, both sides of my family, super strong ladies, super strong women. And she reminded me that when I was younger, I loved Captain Crunch. I still do sometimes. And I would eat it like dry though. I would just get like a paper plate at my grandmother's house and just pour the Captain Crunch and just eat it like a snack. And I remember I don't remember. My mom says she remembers my grandfather coming over and just taking the Captain Crunch from my plate. Like he said, like, give me some of that. And my grandma was like, no. She's like, because you're you're one of the first men that she's going to learn boundaries with. So even though it's just Captain Crunch, don't you dare go and just take her Captain Crunch off of her plate without asking. And I was like, whew. See, I was like that stuff is like implanted. Even though I didn't fully remember it. I mean, again, fierce things in my family. So I'm not surprised that she said that. But I'm like, those are the messages when you're talking about kids, Ken, just a second ago. Like, not wanting, like, don't punish a kid if they don't want to kiss Uncle Harry or whatever. It's like those things do matter, and those things plant seeds in us that last in us forever unless we can unlearn them, or at least be aware that those seeds are even there in us, and then unlearn those things, right? But like, no, it goes so deep. It really goes deep.
I have a less intellectual question.
No, do it.
Let Ken have the intellectual question. I have sort of a pop cultural phenomenon, relationship isolation sort of boundary question. I'm curious to hear if you can give an opinion. I don't know if you're even aware of this, but I'm really amazed by the popularity of certain, and we can just we can discuss the validity of these relationships, of pop cultural shows where couples are separated, like 90 Day Fiance or Love After Lockup. I mean, there is something to be said about why people, we can argue, are these valid relationships? I don't know. But people are watching and people are invested and engaged in these stories. And I'm wondering, what does that say about us looking and being invested in relationships where people are not together?
Well,
physically together. They are separated, and we are, what does that say?
Well, excellent question. And you know what? We're all kind of going through that here in quarantine during a pandemic. And so, we all have our kind of low level version of that happening. One of my clients, who was a little trickier than some, she was newly, she's been married, she's been divorced, she is a lesbian. She was very, very much against dating apps, very against. And I'm like, okay, we're in a pandemic. I don't know where you're going to meet people, and you want to meet people, you're telling me. So you got to maybe embrace the idea of a dating app, at least trying it. And so she did. And speaking kind of to what you're talking about, she's actually dating someone in a country in Europe right now. And they've been dating. Like, I was like, be careful. You could be catfished. Like, I don't know if this is a real person. Like, we don't know. You met on Tinder. I've seen this person. They do a like all weekend, like Saturday, Sunday date every weekend. I've met her. She's legit. She's like a professional in her country. I don't want to name the country just in case she's, whatever. But like, but it's a beautiful thing to watch. And it's kind of like old school courtship. Like, it's like this thing of they've never met in person, but they do this. They do, the video zooming and YouTubing. They do all that stuff on like every day or a few times a week, and it is a legit relationship. And I'm somebody who's all for non-traditional relationships, but even this for me, I was like, oh no, just be careful. But I've seen it in front of my eyes, and I'm like, this is very interesting. And I think this is like a real world example of how it can actually work. Now, let's say, even to your point of, the lockup.
Love dating. After lockup.
Yes. That one. And the other ones, I mean, and with this client, there is going to be this thing of, when you actually meet in person for the first time, like, do you still feel the chemistry that you felt via digital whatever that you met on? And that's a very real question. It is fascinating though, because I think, again, it kind of goes back to, what do we think relationships are? How should they begin? What is supposed to be the way that you find somebody, and what's seen as more legitimate or not? It's like all of these questions come up. And so for me, it's not that, well, it makes good television, right? But it's not that weird to me, in that, again, you're talking to somebody who has seen a lot of things in the non-traditional space in terms of relationships, and I've seen it work. I've seen it go horribly wrong as well, but I'm not surprised. I think it's fascinating, especially to people maybe who are more traditional, maybe who've never thought about experiencing something like this, can't even imagine dating somebody who's in prison or was in prison or lives across the world. Like they can't even imagine that, especially if there's somebody who, you know, is more dependent than independent in terms of what they want in a relationship. That's like, it's like, I can't believe this actually works. Wow. Like, this is amazing. And so, yeah, it's great television. And I think it's a very interesting concept. And again, it brings it back to old world chivalry. This whole pandemic has been well, for the places that are actually closed, there's a lot of places in this country that are still open and you can go to a bar, which again, don't get me started on that. But the places that are more closed, you know, this is the way people are meeting each other. And, you know, I've done a ton of interviews over the last 6 months about dating during the pandemic. It has changed how people date. I think people are more open to the idea of trying something new, back to the trying something new thing, because this is the option. Like, and so, you know, and a lot of people are lonely, you know, if they live alone, especially. Some people do have roommates or live with people, but if you don't live with anybody and you're at home all the time by yourself, and maybe even going into the pandemic, you're like, ooh, you know, I'm kind of feeling like I might want to date somebody. And then this happens and we don't know when it's going to end. You know, you might be more open to trying something new. And I would say, don't knock it until you try it. You never know. I mean, you can meet somebody anywhere. I say it all the time. There's not one right way or wrong way to meet somebody. Some people meet in person and it's amazing. Some people meet in person, it's a disaster. Some people meet, you know, online and it's awesome. Some people, I know literally any way you can meet someone, I know someone where it's worked for them and someone where it's not worked for them. So the main point is just to be open to something new, especially if you can't be open during a pandemic, then when can you be open? Okay.
Erin, do you think there's someone for everyone?
Oh boy. I want to say my like what I'm doing is I'm stopping and pausing and really like letting your questions like sit in me and see what I viscerally think. I think yes, but I think honestly I think it's harder for some people than more than others. It just is, and for a lot of reasons, you know. I think some people have an easier time finding people. I think that there's some people that could have a relationship with a bunch of different people. Like they literally could make a life with a lot of different people and be happy. I think there's some people who are like, who maybe could only really find happiness in partnership with a very specific kind of person. I think that some people are more attractive to people than others. I think some people have more access to people than others do. So with all of, as you can see, I'm a little bit analytical. So a little. So I do think there's somebody for everyone, but I guess the piggyback to that question is, will everyone find somebody? And I don't know. And I know, I feel like I'm going to get emotional about it. I don't know if everyone, I don't think just statistically, not everyone will, for some of the reasons I just mentioned, which makes me sad because I do feel like if everything is aligned, there is someone for everyone in theory. It's just a matter of, will those people find each other? And do they have access to each other? And are they, back to that question of identity and worthiness, like, do they feel like they're worthy of finding someone? Are they going to be honest with themselves about who they actually really want to be with, or the type of person they want to be with? And that ties into, is someone being honest about their identity, you know, and orientation and all of these things? So, I mean, there's so many things. So I guess I just complicated your question with more questions. But I think, yeah, I mean, I do feel like if all things were equal and everyone was open and honest and had access, I do feel like there's somebody for everybody.
Thank you.
Until next time. Hi, I'm Ken.
And I'm Yasmine. And this is Conversation with... sorry.